My name is Brian Lane. I'm a senior transit planner with the San Diego Association of Governments. I'm the project manager along with my co-worker, Zach Brott, on this. He's not able to make it tonight. He's at school for grad school at San Diego State. He'll be on tomorrow night's presentation for the Rapid 41 presentation that we'll be doing. But again, thank you for coming. We'll get started and I'll hand things over to Chris here in a second. We'll have a great conversation, hopefully. And at this point, I'll hand it over to Carlos to talk about interpretation. And Carlos, I don't know if we might want to just do a check to see who needs interpretation, if we just continue with that or not. Maybe leave it to you. Let's see. I'm not hearing you on the English side.
Thought I heard him for a second.
Carlos, we can kind of hear you. I'm not sure.
Hello?
There you
Okay.
go.
There I am. I'm sorry. I was having a problem with the other mic. So as far as continuing with the interpretation, I do believe it's going to be recorded in Spanish as well, right? So the interpretation would have to continue regardless of whether someone's using it or not.
Yes, that's the case, because we might want to post that meeting, so we should keep the interpretation going.
Okay, excellent. So as far as the announcement, and in case somebody joins late, we do have interpretation available to and from Spanish. In the event that there are comments in Spanish, we invite you to go ahead and select English as your language for interpretation. You should see an interpretation icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It looks like a little world. And once you click on that, you can select English as your language. If you don't want to hear the Spanish low in the background when someone speaks Spanish, you should also select mute original audio. I don't believe we have anyone in Spanish yet. So I think we can skip the announcement in Spanish. And if I see someone join late, I'll just share the instructions in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Carlos. So on our next slide, just some guidelines for our meeting tonight. This meeting will be recorded in both English and Spanish. Please keep your microphone muted as long as you can until you request to speak or you'd like to jump in or when we ask, and then we'll love to hear from you all. If you have a question, please raise your virtual hand and then you can unmute you once we call on you, and then or you can type things in the chat. Love to hear from you all. And there'll be tons of opportunities to ask questions near the end of the presentation. And knowing there's only just a few of us, we might change the presentation up here a little bit and just try to make it more informal and get some comments from you. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Chris Wall from HNTV, who can get us started.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks everyone for taking some time out of your evening to join our meeting. I'll go over the agenda and then just kind of jump right to it. So first, I'll introduce the concept of NextGen Rapid. I'll provide an overview of the study that we are conducting with SANDAG as well as NCTD, give a summary of existing conditions within the Route 471 corridor, which all helps us develop our draft study goals and objectives for actually planning and implementing this route. And we'll also cover some potential strategy or project types, improvements that folks will see along the route that can help enable a really good quality bus service. And then we'll give a summary of the upcoming project activities that we're going to be doing over the next several months. For a quick little icebreaker, I'll kick it back to Brian.
Perfect. So like to get to know who each of you are. Maybe just when you can, I'll maybe call on some folks. If you prefer not to, you can just let me know. But otherwise, we'd like to know what area do you live in and where do you travel most often in San Diego County? Example would be I live in Escondido and bike to work on the other side of town. For me, I live in the city of La Mesa and I take the trolley every day to our office in downtown San Diego. I've been doing that for 17 years now, so I could tell you lots of stories of trolley riding. But yeah, so I don't know if maybe we'll jump over to Ed Alberto with the city.
Hi, Ed Alberto, City Traffic Engineer at the City of Escondido. I've been with the City of Escondido for just about less than a month, over a year now. Still getting to know the city myself and people using transit and how we can better help transit riders and improve mobility options in the city. I live in the city of Vista and I bike to work on Bike to Work Day. This past year, I did bike from Vista to City Hall in Escondido, just following the bike routes that I've seen on the iCommute websites. And then I took the train back to Vista. So that was a good experience. It did take me quite a while to get to work biking from Vista to Escondido though. But it's a great experience and I plan to do it again more in the future.
Cool, thanks, Ed. Maybe I'll pass it over to Patty to say hi, and then to Verna, and then to Jason.
Hi, good evening. This is Patty. I no longer live in the city of Escondido. I actually live out in the county, more towards Valley Center, but I still work in Escondido, in central Escondido. And we also help residents and youth on the routes to and from school, work, or other activities. We've been heavily involved in the creek work and use that as some major points to plan for stops and locations for people to be picked up. So we're excited to be part of this team.
Thanks, Patty. Verna, you want to say hi?
Sure. Hi. I actually live in Northeast Escondido, and I only use the bus actually when I go to the airport. I usually get a ride from a friend or a neighbor to Transit Center in Escondido, and then take the bus to downtown San Diego, and then catch another bus, the 992, which is the express bus then to the airport. And it's very inexpensive. I don't have to pay for parking. And it's great. I mean, I wish more people would know about it and do it. And especially if you go early in the morning, those express buses from Escondido to San Diego only take 40 minutes. And then, like I said, you catch the 992, which takes you 10 minutes to the airport. So we can actually get to the airport in about an hour and maybe an hour and 15 minutes, which is not much longer than if you drove down there by car and parked.
Definitely when there's traffic too, right?
Right.
Thanks, Verna. Jason, you want to say hi?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. So my name is Jason. I live off of El Norte, so kind of getting towards the north side of Escondido. Born and raised here my whole life. So just calling in because I'm curious, and I do a lot of traveling. I work remote, so I do a lot of traveling within the Escondido city, groceries, errands, all that stuff. So yeah, just curious to see what you guys have in store.
Very good. Thanks for coming. And lastly, right now, Juan, you want to say hi?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Juan Reynoso. I live in East Escondido near Oak Hill Elementary. My family and I have been residents of Oak Hill area since, gosh, the late 90s, a long time. I currently work remotely, so there's no work commute there. But when I do travel outside of Escondido, I do like taking the rapid, I forget the number, 215 down to San Diego. Similar to what Verna was mentioning earlier, it's super convenient to go to Padres game or to get into downtown quickly. And so just interested in seeing what this new rapid option will be for Escondido, and here to learn a little bit more.
Awesome, thanks. I'll kick it back to Chris. I don't know if you want to tell us your story too, Chris, before you go to the next slide.
Yeah, happy to do it. So as Brian mentioned, I work for HNTB. We're a transportation planning and engineering firm. I'm the consultant project manager working with Brian and Sandag and the local transit operators on this study. I also, like Brian, live in La Mesa, also travel downtown. I love to use the trolley and transit, but I also have a 3-year-old and his daycare is very out of the way. And so it would take probably an hour and a half door to door, maybe more each way to not only drop him off, but then get downtown. So these days, unfortunately, I drive, but I actually went about 10 or 11 years without driving to work, and even several of those years didn't own a car. So I'm a big believer in transit and really excited about this study and the opportunities that it presents for not only Escondido, but the other corridors that we're evaluating as well. So let's get into it, and thanks everyone for taking a few minutes to introduce yourselves. It's cool that we have a more intimate group here. We can have a lot more dialogue, a lot more conversation, and the folks that are attending will hopefully get more out of it as a result. So what is Next Gen Rapid? Well, it's a key strategy of the 2021 regional plan, specifically the Transit Leap strategy, the regional plan that was adopted last December by the Sandag Board of Directors. And if you look on the map here, it's these bold teal lines that you see kind of throughout the region. It's similar to what you would see on the 215, which goes through Mid-City, or the 225, the South Bay Rapid that goes from downtown down to Otay Mesa and Eastlake. It's a faster service. It stops at fewer locations than local bus routes. At times, it can operate in kind of dedicated guideways or priority travel lanes. If folks have traveled through Mid-City in downtown or in San Diego, central San Diego, you might have seen the red bus-only lanes that are along El Cajon Boulevard that go through University Heights, Normal Heights, and North Park. It gets priority treatment at stoplights, and so it can actually communicate with the traffic signals and jump ahead of cars that are waiting to pass through an intersection. It's really very frequent service, so every 10 minutes a bus is scheduled to arrive, and that will happen all day from early in the morning until very late at night. It also has other features or amenities which increase reliability and convenience for travelers. It has larger, more modern bus stops that have seating for several people, shade and shelter from either the sun or rain. And it even comes equipped with digital display signs that tell people when the next bus is arriving, which really helps with trip planning. The study itself that we're conducting is really the next step in taking the routes that were identified in the regional plan and moving them closer to reality. Route 471 specifically was selected because it would serve large numbers of residents within the city of Escondido that really depend on transit and who don't currently have rapid service available. So what we're going to be doing is developing a few different concepts that show where the route would go, where stations would be located, and then we're going to define specific improvements, whether it's bus-only lanes or the traffic light priority technology that I mentioned earlier, that'll help Rapid succeed and really be competitive with a car. Verna, you mentioned how getting down to the airport doesn't take much more time than it would to drive. We want that to be the case for people traveling even through the city of Escondido itself. So what we're going to do is ultimately identify a preferred alternative or a few different alternatives that would be potentially advanced into further stages of project development. So that's environmental review, preliminary engineering, and then ultimately construction. I want to be clear here. The funding for this route is not yet been secured, and so one of the things that we're going to be doing as part of this study is identifying funding sources and trying to take advantage of local, state, and even federal monies that can be used to build these types of services. And then ultimately, it'll be up to the board of directors at Sandag to decide when we can actually move these projects forward. So taking a look at the corridor itself, the 471 starts in eastern Escondido, kind of on the, out towards where Bear Valley and Valley Parkway intersect. And then it travels west or a little southwest here along Valley. And I want to just quickly mention that the solid line is the route as it's drawn in the regional plan. The dashed line that we have here is a potential alternative route that we might propose as part of this study and evaluate as well. And so again, coming, west along Valley, it goes through the more central area of Escondido, continues west across I-15, and then heads up towards the Palomar Medical Center along Citricado. And then it actually will utilize the Citricado Parkway roadway extension will be open within the next year or so, and we'll continue south and then kind of loop back here and head back towards the 15. As part of the existing conditions assessment that we've conducted, we looked at several things. The first being population and just kind of the distribution of where people live within the corridor. The map on the left is the current population density, and the map on the right is the projected or future population density that is for the year 2035. I want to quickly point out that our report that we developed for the existing conditions assessment, it also includes more detailed population characteristics. So the maps that you see now are the total population, but we also drill down and get into more detail and determine where social equity focused populations live. So that's low income, minority, and senior residents. We also look to see where people under the age of 18 live, households with 0 cars, and people with a disability. And this is all really important because a lot of people in these populations really depend on transit as a lifeline service to get to whether grocery shopping or medical appointments or work or other places like that. And it's really important that we provide them with high quality service. So as you can see here on the map, there's a large concentration of population kind of in the middle, a little bit north of where the route is proposed, as well as kind of on the ends of it. We also looked at concentrations of employment in the corridor as well. And again, the map on the left is existing. The map on the right is future for the year 2035. And as you can see, most of the employment within the study area is concentrated on the west side of I-15 near the Auto Parkway and Citricado corridors. There is additional employment, along the Valley and Grand areas as well, particularly in the downtown Escondido area where there's higher levels of commercial and other employment-based land uses, and even out here a little bit to the east as you go out on Valley. Another thing we looked at as part of our existing conditions assessment are the activity centers within the corridor. And so these are the places that typically generate a lot of people, either who live there or working or recreating or doing other things there. It generates a lot of travel and a lot of activity. And so as you can see, most of the activity centers are kind of along the Valley Boulevard corridor. There's a lot of them in the downtown Escondido area, but there's also larger commercial shopping areas further east on Valley, as well as along or near the Escondido Promenade. And then the Palomar Medical Center is a big activity center for the area and even beyond the city of Escondido as well. So I want to take a moment here and pause and hear from everybody. I'll kick it back to Brian, and I think given the small number of people that we have here, this can be a more interactive discussion. Feel free to enter your thoughts into the chat, but if you want to talk as well, go for it. So Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So just trying to fill in that map a little more. Is there anything we missed? Is there any places that you really go to a lot along this corridor that we should consider either, possibly moving the routing or adding a stop along this corridor? We haven't decided where the stops will be. So yeah, feel free to raise your hand or jump in. Verna, I saw you on mute.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the Escondido Art Center, California Art Center. You've got Escondido, City of Escondido administration, but that's actually that's on another street, kind of the entry for that. So the
Right.
entry for the art center would either be off of Woodwork or it'd be off of Escondido Boulevard.
So the art center is off of Woodward or Escondido Boulevard?
Yeah, it's between those two. And I mean, I know there's a lot of kids who they have dance there. They've got all kinds of stuff going on there,
Yeah, thanks for that. And you said number 4 is it's off. Should it be a little bit further west?
Um,
Remember,
Yeah,
Chris, where we
it's-
had the last meeting? It was right next to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
So-
it's right next to 4, right? This Escondido administration.
Right.
It should be at Broadway and Valley.
You guys, can I get the trash for you? Yeah, the trash.
And that's, sorry, I want to make sure I understand. That's the administration building we're talking about, City Hall.
Yeah, City Hall. It's at
Yeah,
Broadway and Valley.
yeah. And the art center's at Escondido and Woodward.
You know, and
Or
yeah,
it's
Escondido between Woodward and Valley.
yeah.
Okay. Great. And then Juan, you said 7 and 8 are mislabeled. Are they flipped?
Yeah, they're flipped. So Palomar
Okay.
College is the easternmost one, and Vineyard Square should be number 7. I think
Got it.
one point that you were making earlier, Chris, that I think is really important is the thinking about the alternative option down Grand. And so transparency, I was part of the city's independent redistricting commission. So we looked at population data for many dozens and dozens and dozens of hours. And yes, along Grand east of Ash, there are large concentrations of low-income residents and residents of color. And so there might be more people who would benefit from this type of service if the route were to go down Grand than to go down Valley Parkway on both the outward and inward routes. I don't know if it's helpful. I know there's a transit route. Yes, and right, Palomar Medical Center. That is now just going to be a large residential complex. Number 6. But I don't know if you all can look into the NCTD data. There are some bus routes that go down Grand, down that dash area, and you can get a sense of, I don't know, ridership comparisons between Grand and Valley along that route. I mean, just as my personal opinion, I think the option going down Grand would be great. I don't know if the Grand is a narrower street, and I don't know if there would be like traffic engineering issues if you all were to go down Grand, but it would be a good option.
Yeah, no, that's really good input. And I think a couple thoughts, you know, when we're starting to put together our alternatives for the corridor, we're going to come up with 3 different concepts. And so there might be one that does more of a circular type route where it goes east out on Grand and then comes back west on Valley. And there might be one that stays on Valley the whole time. And we'll obviously, or not obviously, excuse me, we'll look at the differences between those 2 options, right? How many people are we serving, whether they're residents along Grand, employees of the commercial land uses on Valley, or, you know, folks that visit those areas for shopping purposes. To your question or your point or your thought about the traffic engineering along Grand, you know, I know that I believe there's on-street parking on there as well, and it is narrow in parts of it. So those sorts of things are things that we'll consider as we're looking at these different options. You know, we might take a look at if we were to implement service on Grand, what would that require in terms of you know, right-of-way needs, and what would potential effects be if we were to propose certain improvements in certain areas. And I'll talk a little bit more about specific strategies on later slides. And so that'll hopefully provide a little bit more context about what we plan on doing.
Yeah, I was
But
just going to jump in, Chris, that there are a bunch more slides, and you're going to be talking about some of the way we're going to look at streets and traffic and congestion, as well as some of the things that we can put out there, depending on what's on the streets and the congestion levels. So,
yeah,
lots of good stuff still on these slides.
yeah, no, this is, yeah,
Sorry,
lots to come.
I couldn't find my little hand. Can I just add it, in representing our clients? One of the big conversations was about the community clinics. So
Community clinics.
yeah, so that, because that, as they all mentioned, that the Palomar is gone, but there are neighborhood healthcare and San Ysidro Healthcare and Grable Clinic, and Arch has joined Palomar Medical, but they're all in that little area along Valley and Grand.
Okay, that's great to know. And what we're gonna do as we evaluate these alternatives is we'll have a lot of this data geocoded. We're gonna use GIS or Geospatial Information System software to look at, how close all of these activity centers are to proposed routes and just what sort of potential improvements we would want to propose that would help people access the service from those activity centers. So I love it. This is great input already. Let's keep going. So we covered this. Thank you all again. This is all really good input, and this is why we have these meetings, because folks that live in the community know the community very well. So we also looked at existing transit services as well as planned transit routes in the area. And so it's important for us to understand this because we really want to provide seamless connections between Route 471 and other existing or planned services where it makes sense to. And this is all in the name of enhancing ridership potential. If we can create more of a network, it makes it easier to use transit to get where people need to go. And so the routes that are shown here on the right are not all inclusive. The study is going to evaluate how 471 would connect to other routes, but I'll give a quick overview. So the Sprinter Light Rail provides service at Escondido Transit Center, which is kind of right in the middle here. There is a Breeze Rapid Route 350 that goes south down towards the 15, and pardon me, this is I think Via Rancho down here.
Yes.
And then there are Rapid 235 and Rapid Express Route 280, one of the express routes that Verna mentioned earlier, provides service from Escondido South. There's also a few planned transit services. There's the 471 that we're analyzing, and then there are planned frequency improvements for both Breeze Bus and Sprinter Light Rail services, as well as expanded service hours. So buses or trains starting service earlier in the day and going further into the evenings as well. So another interactive moment here. This is actually going to be a poll, and I'll kick it to Brian to go over it.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Chris. So we just want to hear from you. We're going to pop a poll up here in a second. You'll be able to click on it, hopefully if all your computers allow it. But we want to know what stops you from taking transit along this route. Does transit take too long? Does the buses not come frequently enough? Do you have to make too many transfers to get where you need to go? Do you not feel safe riding your bike or walking to the transit stops? Or does it just not go to the places that you need to go? Or if there's other, you can either tell us live or in the chat. So here's the poll. Feel free to jump in and make some choices. It's multiple choice, so there's not just one perfect answer sometimes. And once we get enough folks jumping in and answering, we'll show the results and discuss it really quickly.
And I think we need to enable the poll. I'm seeing on the Spanish room, I'm seeing a note that says host and panelists can't vote. So I'm not sure if folks see that as well.
Yeah, I see the same on my end.
Kristen might have to reset it.
I'm working on that right now.
Cool.
It says, hold on, share results. Let me see if I can relaunch it. Ah, here we go. Continue. Okay, you see that now?
Yeah, it looks good.
Excellent.
There we go. Now I'm seeing votes. Thanks, Kristen. So far, everyone is correct. No wrong answers.
And I think we got everyone.
Perfect.
Because it's 5 non-project team participants.
Right. All right. Can you guys see the results now too? So it's looking like 2 out of 5 all said it takes too long. Buses don't come frequently enough, and there's too many transfers. But I also heard it doesn't go where it needs to go. And then there was other. I don't know if there's something else. If anyone wants to raise your hand and jump in and speak or put it in the chat, what other things make you?
I'm the other, because I live in Vista, I commute to
Right.
St. Paul, and just thinking right now, I should probably use the bus more to when I need to do field checks at certain sites. So I'm gonna start to do that.
Perfect. Thanks, Ed. All right, Chris, hand it back to
All
you.
right. All right, thanks everyone. We'll have a couple more of those poll questions in the future here, so looking forward to that as well. Another thing, we talked about it a little bit a few slides ago, but we also looked at the roadways within the study area, specifically the number of lanes and the roadway width. As you can see, well, real quickly here, the map on the left, the solid lines are existing roadways and the dashed lines are planned roadways. I also want to mention we are going to provide a link to a PDF as well after this, so folks can open that up. They can, and we're going to upload maps as well. So if you want to look at these offline and zoom in and things like that, you're more than welcome to. Just to quickly summarize, we've focused this table on the roadways that our routes will traverse, as well as roadways that intersect them. And it's really important, as I mentioned a minute ago, to understand the roadway configurations, because they'll affect the types of improvements that we recommend, not only at intersections, but along the roadway segments in between them. So as you can see by the table here, there's quite a bit of variety in terms of the roadway characteristics that Route 471 may operate along. So anything from 2 all the way up to 6 lanes in some areas. The right-of-way width varies quite a bit, and there are also variations in terms of whether there's on-street parking or not in certain areas. The lane widths vary. The presence, there's a cycle track going down Valley right in front of the city hall and near the transit center as well. So there's a lot of different variables happening along these roadways, and these are all things that we're going to be taking into consideration when we go ahead and identify specific improvements along the route. A few other things to mention: in terms of planned updates that will occur by 2035, some much sooner. The Valley Parkway from Valley Boulevard to Midway will be widened to 6 lanes. I mentioned the Citricato extension earlier, but it'll be basically the gap between Harmony Grove Village Parkway and West Valley will be closed by 2025, and actually I think even sooner. And then as well, Citricato Parkway will be connected. Sorry, this is the one that I just described. It'll also be widened to 4 lanes from Harmony Grove Village to West Valley. So these are all things that we're taking into consideration when we're looking to identify improvements along the route. Looking at active transportation as well, the location of existing or planned pedestrian and bicycle facilities is important. It could determine where we put the stations or stops along the route, or it might help us determine whether additional non-motorized or bicycle and pedestrian connections are needed. So if we decide that a bus stop might need to be located in a certain area because there's a lot of activity around it, but there are no existing or planned bike lanes or bike facilities, or maybe missing sidewalks, maybe the need to add more mid-block crossings along roadways that would allow people to get to that station, we would actually propose those improvements as part of the package for each concept in the corridor. This map here shows the existing and planned facilities. The existing is bold and the planned are a dash. One thing that's not showing up here in the data, but is the cycle track that goes along Valley right near City Hall. There's also there's a variety of bike facilities throughout the area, whether it's multi-use paths along Mission Road. There's bike lanes along Valley and Citricato Parkway at various locations. And it's also on roadways that intersect Valley and Grand as well. That includes Center City Parkway and Broadway. And there's also a planned bike lane along San Pasqual Valley Road that would intersect Valley and Grand as well.
Hey, Chris, really quick, I noticed Verna has her hand up. I don't know if it's from this slide or the slide before. Sorry, I just caught it.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Verna.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was actually from the slide before, but another location is Interfaith Community Services, which is on Quince and Washington, because, you know, that's the people who are unsheltered, obviously have no way probably to get there. I think it would be really important to have something very close by there. Maybe there is already, I don't know.
Thanks, Verna. I wrote that down.
And then Juan, do you have a question or a comment?
Well, I had a separate comment, but to follow up with Verna, there's also an interfaith location off of Ash in between Valley Parkway and Grand. So on the eastern side, I think either option would benefit that interfaith location. Can you go back to the prior slide and say a few more words about the first bullet under updates? So there's going to be an expansion of Valley Parkway from 4 lanes to 6 lanes from essentially where the old hospital is all the way to Midway. Was that part of a separate project, or is that so that there can be, like, I don't know, a bus only lane along this route? Why the expansion to 6 lanes?
Yeah, good question. So the data that we're looking at here is all information that was provided to Sandag as part of the regional plan update for the plan that was adopted last year. And typically what happens, and Brian and Ed, feel free to jump in here, is that local jurisdictions will provide this information to Sandag, and it's information that may be included in a community plan update or in their capital improvement program or other planning documents. And so that's how this plan widening occurred, and that's how we received it.
Yeah, I was just gonna jump in and say that these are things that are officially put in their plans, not necessarily funded though. So like Chris is pointing out, none of these may be currently funded by the city of Escondido. And as we work through this rapid project, city planners and staff and engineers may reconsider some of these. So yeah, it's a good question, because as Chris was even pointing some things out before, like Citricado Parkway, if we're going to connect that and maybe widen, would it just be straight normal widening, or now that we're considering a rapid route on it, the city may completely rethink that and decide to put a bus only lane and a protected bike lane or something as well, rather than widen just for autos. So I hate to put us into a corner with a lot of this, is, and you know, especially if it's not currently funded or environmental work has been done yet.
Got it. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So we talked about active transportation. We also looked at traffic congestion within the corridor. And I want to quickly mention that we recognize that the data here that you're seeing on these maps is from Google Maps, and it is based on, you know, cell phone data, and it reflects typical conditions. However, we realize that that's one data point, and so we are also going to be supplementing that with information from NCTD. They have a speed and reliability study that they're undertaking right now that looks at you know, how buses are affected by local roadway congestion in this area. So we're working with NCTD on that. We also have a project development team that's comprised of staff from local agencies, as well as transit operators and Sandag. And so we're getting input from 3 sources really when we're evaluating this. The maps that you can see here on the left is the AM peak hour, and on the right is the PM peak hour. And the conditions in the study area are typically or generally more congested in the PM peak hour, which again is the right map. Most of the congestion we're seeing again along the roadways that the Route 4071 could traverse is occurring at intersections, and as well as some of the roadway segments in between them, in particular along Grand Avenue right here just east of Central City, and then Central Escondido, and then along Valley Parkway as well out here to the east. So we've gone through and conducted existing conditions assessment, and I just want to point out that it's still in draft form. So a lot of the information that folks have been providing us this evening, we're going to take that and we're going to use it to revise the report. So it's very helpful input, and thank you again. What did we learn from the assessment that we've conducted so far? Really, it's going to be important to enhance non-motorized access to bus stops. We see a lot of anticipated population and employment growth in areas that are along the Route 471 corridor, but not immediately adjacent to it. And so, people are typically wanting to access transit from shorter distances within 5 to 10 minutes. And so it's really important to determine ways to get people from where they live or work to the location where the bus is servicing, if we can't provide direct service. And so, again, non-motorized bicycle and pedestrian access, even things like micromobility, which is part of the flexible fleet strategy that's in the regional plan. These are things like e-scooters, e-bikes, things like that. We can potentially recommend those types of services that'll, again, help people get to and from the transit route easier. We also realize that it's important to provide service outside of what are typically known as peak travel periods. So the morning and evening commute, or rush hour, as folks call it or know it. People are making trips in this corridor for all different types of reasons and at all different times. And so we really want to make sure that we provide that service throughout the day so they can use it for all different types of trips. We're also going to consider, given the roadway congestion that we talked about, the possibility of routing the service along parallel roadways that potentially have less traffic. And so, again, we want to make sure that we're still providing service to where most people are living or working or conducting other activities. That we want to maximize ridership, but if there's opportunities to provide the service along a roadway that's maybe next to a primary roadway, that can allow us to provide faster service, more reliable service, and still be close to where people are living or working or otherwise conducting activities. We are going to explore that. We talked earlier about making the bus trip competitive with a car trip in terms of travel time. So we're really going to focus on improvements that'll do that. We talked a fair amount about roadway characteristics, whether that's the number of lanes or the right-of-way width, and it varies quite a bit throughout the corridor, and at times it can change frequently in short distances. And so the improvements that we identify really have to be sensitive to the characteristics along a certain roadway. And that's taking into consideration, non-motorized uses as well. So if there's a cycle track right near City Hall, there's bike lanes and other bike facilities throughout the area. We're going to look at the big picture of what exists in the roadway today and how can this service be integrated within it. And we also see, looking at the population data, that low-income senior populations are expected to increase, and it's going to be really critical to provide folks reliable transit service that they can use to make very important trips. So that brings us to another poll opportunity. Brian?
Yeah, so kind of similar. Oh no, this is the different one. So what do you think is the biggest problem getting around on this route? Is it the traffic congestion, the unsafe conditions for biking and walking, there's not enough transit options, or other? So we're going to go ahead and launch the poll and see what y'all think. I think this one's just one choice. So what is the biggest problem? One more. We'll close the poll. See if everyone get a chance. There we go. Traffic congestion and other. So love to hear about what are some of the other reasons. What might be the biggest problem getting around on this route if we were to put transit out there?
So again, I'm the other, but one thing that I could offer is earlier this year at City Council, there was a request to relocate a bus stop on Grand closer to Ash Street. And one of the reasons that request went through was because of the grade of Ash Street and for the senior citizens to get there. So one thing that I think we should consider is the topography of the routes and how to get to them.
Yeah, topography, definitely.
That's a good point, Ed. And just I mentioned micromobility and things like that a minute ago. We also recognize that, you know, e-scooters and e-bikes are not services that everyone can use. I love my parents, but they're in their 70s now, and I don't know how comfortable I would be if they're cruising around on a scooter. So, you know, we are mindful of the users, the types of folks that are going to want to use this service, and the non-motorized connections that we're going to propose are going to be sensitive to that.
Great. Verna, I see your hand up.
Well, it's not on here even as a, but I just think such a big problem with people not taking buses is intimidation. They don't know, there's not enough information about where buses go, when they go. And it's intimidating to most people. I've taken a number of people downtown that have never ever taken the bus before because it's scary to them. I mean, they don't know, where do you get the ticket and all those stuff, you know, where's it going to drop me off? And so I just feel like I wish, especially if it's going to be, we're trying to be a little bit more catering to seniors, if there would be like some, I don't know, what you want to call it, class or workshop at the senior centers, how to take the bus.
Yeah, travel training.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, we hear that a lot. Great one. Thanks, Verna. Juan?
I'm not sure if this falls into this section, but one thing that is something to consider, and maybe less of an issue on Grand Avenue and more on Valley Parkway, is that it can get very hot in East Valley Parkway. There's just large parking lots, a lot of concrete, very few shaded trees. And so waiting for a bus on Valley Parkway can be a uncomfortable experience if you're there for 15, 20 minutes, etc., particularly during the summer months. And so there can be any consideration for like abundant shading or seating, and particularly to take into account, like, I don't know, different angles at which the sun is at different parts of the day, because that way to make the experience of waiting for the next rapid bus to come along to be more pleasant.
Yeah, 100%. We've been hearing that a lot lately, especially in South County, even questions of equity. Are shelters and shade trees equitably distributed around the region? You know, and people who ride buses, you know, a lot of folks might have worked a long day. Now they got to stand out in the sun for 20 minutes waiting for that bus. So, well, first, we'd love to make the bus every 5 minutes so you don't have to wait. But when you do have to wait, there should be something out there for folks. All right, Chris, I'll get back to you.
Thanks, Brian. One other thing we heard, we did a pop-up outreach event at Escondido Transit Center last week, and one of the bus drivers was there, and he mentioned at some stops, if there's not enough light around, you know, if he's driving at night, he might not even see that there's people waiting to take the bus, and then before he knows it, he's driven past it. And so in addition to, you know, the shade, the streetscaping strategy that you mentioned, Juan, we also are looking at things like lighting, and not only from you know, to make sure the bus drivers see people, but it's more of a safety issue as well. So that's definitely something that we're thinking about. So some additional findings from our initial assessment of existing conditions. Really, there's like I mentioned, there's a lot of traffic along Valley and Grand Avenue, particularly east of Center City Parkway. It occurs not only at intersections, but along the roadway segments themselves. The lots of traffic in the PM peak period. And so one of the things that we really need to focus on here is how do we make this bus operate efficiently, quickly, again, all in the name of providing reliable, high quality transit that's competitive with the automobile. We did look at collision data as part of our assessment, and there's a lot of bicycle and pedestrian involved collisions along the roadways in our corridor, and key roadways that are connecting to Valley and Grand Avenue. And so it's really important for us to recommend some of these non-motorized connection strategies that help people get to and from this service safer, or in a safe manner, I should say. And then just in terms of the types of trips, there's a lot of employment west of I-15, as I mentioned. And so we see a lot of the transit trips that are happening now, which we got using the NCTD onboard survey information. Those are happening west of I-15, whereas there are a lot of school-based trips happening east of I-15, as well as trips made for, you know, commercial and other purposes. So why is all of this important? Well, understanding the corridor conditions helps us develop our goals and objectives for Rapid 471. And so at a high level, we want to provide reliable, high quality transit service that, again, as I mentioned, is competitive with the car travel. We want to maximize the amount of people that we can get to use the service. And so we're going to do that by, you know, we want to serve key activity centers and areas with high concentrations of people and jobs. We want to provide that high quality service outside of peak travel periods. And we want to enhance non-motorized access beyond a 5 or 10 minute travel shed or travel distance. And we also want to identify active transportation or non-motorized improvements that improve safety, or at least have the potential to. We want to improve access for social equity focused populations, so low income, minority and senior populations, as well as, you know, transit dependent populations, people under the age of 18, zero car households, and people with a disability. It's important to provide a service that directly connects social equity focused populations with job centers, education institutions, and other basic needs, whether that's healthcare or grocery stores. We want to connect communities to key services throughout the day, and we want to ensure stations are accessible. We also want to gain support from the public and key stakeholders. This will help us, or we can achieve this by implementing context-sensitive strategies. I mentioned that earlier when talking about the roadway characteristics. And we also want to implement a service that it serves multiple travel markets or types of trips within each corridor. So whether it's work-based, recreational trips, going to the grocery store, going to a doctor's appointment, whatever it is, we make sure people can use the service for a variety of purposes. And we also want to implement a cost-effective and financially feasible service. And we can achieve this by, you know, minimizing impacts to system-wide operating costs. We can design a project with high funding feasibility, and we can do that in a way by, if we can show that we're serving, you know, a lot of people along a route, have the potential to generate high ridership numbers, that will help us compete for funds from local, state, or federal agencies to help build the route. And we also want to identify potential transit-oriented development opportunities. These are not mobility improvements specifically, but if you can build multifamily housing or mixed-use development along a route, a portion of the money that's made off of that development can be used to fund some of the ongoing operational costs of a service. So those are our initial goals and objectives, and understanding those, it helps us identify the types of improvements that we can make along the corridor. And so I'll go through the next several slides will be showing the potential improvements that we could make as part of this study, or we could recommend. So bus only lanes, we talked about those earlier. These provide a dedicated space for the bus to operate along a roadway. Business exit and transit lanes, or BAT lanes, are similar. It's a variation of bus only lanes, but it doesn't restrict business access or inhibit right turn movements, you know, into driveways or at intersections or anything like that. We're also considering, you know, dedicated guideways as part of this study. And so this picture here is from the South Bay Rapid down in Otay or Eastlake, and it is similar to what is in place if folks have traveled along Park Boulevard near Hillcrest or University Heights. It's a fully dedicated right-of-way. The stations are located here immediately adjacent to the lanes that the bus travels in. And it's a more robust way of providing space for the bus to operate in and not be in mixed traffic. There's also several things that we can do at the intersections along this corridor. The first one is called a Q jump lane, And this is basically a dedicated space for the bus to use that allows it to bypass auto congestion. This is typically coupled with what's called transit signal priority. And so there's a device or a transponder on the bus that communicates with the traffic light. And when the bus pulls up to the intersection, the light knows that it's there, and it allows it to go ahead of the cars that are waiting that you see here. There's other roadway and intersection improvements that can improve access to stations for people either walking or riding their bike. We're going to explore those as well. And these are a little different than the kind of not the larger non-motorized improvements that we've been talking about, in the sense that they're located very close to the stations themselves. In terms of what we can do at the stations or stops themselves, off-board fare payment is a great way to have people pay, get their ticket, whether while they're waiting, excuse me. And that way, when they get on the bus, it doesn't take the additional time to, pay for their fare while other folks are waiting to board the bus. We can look at level or all door boarding setups. And so level boarding is great because it allows people with mobility devices to quickly board a bus. It doesn't require the bus to deploy its ramp or to kneel, which folks may have seen where a bus kind of lowers down so it's closer to the ground. All of that, saves time as the bus is loading and unloading passengers, and just improves the overall travel time along a route. Same thing with all door boarding. If folks can get on the bus using multiple doors, you can get people on quicker. We're also going to look at potential, stop relocations or consolidations. And the goal with this is really to improve a passenger experience and maximize the travel time effectiveness. And as you can see here, we are also looking at enhanced station amenities. We've talked about, shade, light, and providing seats for folks. And you can even see here, there's a digital display that shows what time the next bus will arrive, which helps people with trip planning. It gives them an opportunity to communicate to family members or coworkers if a bus is late. They'll know that in advance, and they can just let people know kind of where they are along their trip. There's also several things we can do to improve connectivity to and from the stations. And so we've talked about bicycle and pedestrian improvements throughout the presentation. Here's a few pictures that show what these could look like. So whether it's mid-block crossings, more robust bicycle facilities like a cycle track, which is shown here. All pedestrian and bicycle facilities or improvements would be ADA compliant. And then I mentioned the flexible fleets or microtransit. These are also, some potential strategies that we could recommend that would help people get to and from stations effectively. A few other things that we're considering as part of this. So modifications to the planned alignments, not only the 471, but we might propose reconfiguration of additional routes in the area, either that intersect Route 471 or that share a roadway segment. There's also the transit-oriented development or TOD opportunities that we would potentially explore. And again, this is a way to not only increase the number of people that are making trips along the route, but it can also be used as a revenue source for ongoing operation and maintenance costs. So with that, we'll go back to Brian for another poll.
Thanks, Chris. So after hearing all that, we want to know what are the top 3 things that you would like to see improved in transit, specifically with this planned routes. You want more frequent service, faster travel times, more reliable on-time service, the easier fare payment system that Chris was talking about, fewer stops along the route, nicer, cleaner transit vehicles, more comfortable stops or stations, or other. And then we can talk about that afterwards. So we'll launch the poll. There we go. And oh, there we go. People are starting to answer. think everyone has submitted, right?
Yep.
Perfect. So faster travel times. Yep. That's why we call this rapid bus, right? That's what everyone kind of wants is to get from point A to point B at least closer to what the car can do. And so we hear you, and that's one of the main goals of a rapid bus. Reliability, an easier fare payment system, I'm seeing as top answers. More frequent service, so not only faster, but when it's more frequent, you don't have to wait, so your overall travel time is reduced. And then the stops and stations being more comfortable. Great. Thanks, everyone. I think we're getting close to winding down, and
We are.
yep. So here's another last chance. If there's any other questions, comments, we'd be happy to take them, hear from you. Otherwise, we'll talk about the next steps for this project and then let you go back to your lives tonight. Go ahead, Juan.
I just wanted to thank you all for this presentation. It was super informative. I'm really excited that a bus rapid option is coming to East Escondido. So this is just generally very exciting. I just wanted to share that I guess at a high level, I'm very supportive of all the transit strategies you all laid out or just now, the bus rapid, like the bus only lane, or the slip lane, or I forget all the various options you listed, but very supportive of them. And just wanted to say that particularly along Valley Parkway and 2nd Avenue in Central Escondido, I think there's generally space to provide or to have a dedicated bus lane or segments of bus lane. Because just generally that area is very wide. There's sometimes up to 4 lanes. And so I think that's one opportunity to do that. And just one final thing I want to share is that one thing to consider if you all do choose the Grand Avenue route is that a lot of folks who live in apartments right there along Grand Avenue east of Ash Street rely on the street parking for because the apartment buildings in the area don't provide sufficient parking for all the residents who live there. And so I'm not like being in support of street parking. I generally am not in support of it, but it's just like one thing to consider in that there may be future resident pushback to that particular piece. And so thinking of strategies to mitigate any potential pushback in the future from potentially removing some of the parking for a bus only lane, or to make it easier for that route to happen. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Definitely.
100%. I know that, yeah, a lot of transit advocates and others talk about, removing parking, but sometimes it's an essential part of some people's, if there's no other alternative for them, and it's something to consider. Thanks. Berna, I saw your hand up, and then Patty.
Yeah, I just wonder how we can do more promotion, and, like if Sandag or whoever had like, a special day, it would be, I don't know, could be one day a month or something. Come and learn how to use the bus and you get a free ride. And it could be like from the senior center or from one of the high schools. I just feel like the kids could be using the bus so much more. And I just don't think they are, because sometimes they don't know where it goes or how to use it. And I'm sure there's all kinds of other concerns too, in terms of parents with safety and stuff. But honestly, we have to get our younger generation to get to use the buses, the trains, whatever.
I love to hear that. We just started a pilot earlier this year to give kids 18 and under free transit for over a year. As part of that was supposed to be a whole big part of education and outreach to them. And we were kind of delayed really kicking that off with our CBO partners. But in the coming months, you'll be seeing something like that around the county. So, because that was our our Sandag's, one of our goals is to, if you can get kids riding and knowing about transit, you might make them transit riders for life, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm really a believer of that. Yep.
Thanks, Berna. Patty?
Yeah, thank you.
And I just wanted, and it all ties to the things that Verna was mentioning and things that we do, like we talked about in our program, taking kids on the bus. But the problem has to be with the routes. But I wanted to share that maybe we need to also reach back out to the high school district. The stakeholder group, we have April Moore from the high school district on there. They had a meeting last night to talk about the potential of going back to home to school busing. And it might be something that we can consolidate with our plan, depending on where it was, because that was one of the concerns that they had with the routes, was that kids that needed to use the bus wouldn't be able to access it. So I just wanted to give that to you to add in there, that maybe you guys could reach out to April for that info.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. We'll connect with you after to get some of that information. Thanks, Patty. All right, well, moving on. Few more slides and then we're out of here. So our upcoming activities, like I mentioned, we did some community roundtables with people to talk about some of the details. We did the pop-up events. You might have heard there's one at Escondido Transit Center last week. And then this week we've been doing these virtual meetings with you all. We'll now take all that information we've been gathering over the last couple months and start developing the options for the rapid service. And then we'll come back out to the public early next spring to get more thoughts and feedback from everyone on what we're seeing. And then eventually we'll wrap up into a draft report, all of these, and present that to Sandag and NCTD and MTS's boards, as well as other cities. And hopefully that helps us then get funding for these routes, and we can move forward and actually build them and get them in operations. But obviously we got to start somewhere, and this is great. Getting some public feedback from you all. So with that, our last slide, I think we have our contact information and some ways you can further get a hold of us. Like Chris mentioned, we'll get the PDF out to you for this presentation so you can see it. I think Jason left, but he was looking forward to seeing that. We'll get that out. Zach Brott's email address is on here if you have further questions, or you can get a hold of Patty if you're familiar with the folks up there in Escondido as well. So again, I don't know if there's any final last words from anyone else, but I really thanks for your time and coming and listening to us tonight, and hope you all have a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks so much. Okay, bye-bye.
Night.
Bye.
I think you guys can stop recording.
Yeah,
Yep.
let me stop that right now.